Hello, Soul Crew. So great to see you here today in another moment of the now. Today's transmission goes out to the deep feelers, the sensitive ones, and those out there who have been really working on themselves inside out, working on your boundaries, working on being accountable for your own life. How have you played a part in everything that has happened, and whether there were things that were outside of your control, how are you responding towards it, and how are you taking charge of yourself? There's insights on how to continue on this road, because we'll get there, but it can be lonely and it can be exhausting, and sometimes we feel that we're constantly working and there's a lot of little problems maybe, or there's these things that you feel that you've achieved, but then a lot of little things take away your energy. So the main idea for this transmission is to highlight the importance of sacred healing. Sacred healing is a form of healing that goes deeper than what meets the eye. It usually involves ancestral healing and cycle breaking. What this means is, like, it's not just something that might have happened within your timeline or your lifetime. It also implies understanding that there's a lot of things within your programming, if you may, within your DNA, that predisposes you to certain behaviors. And then recognizing that, right? Like, not being so hard on ourselves, and also recognizing, like, there's family tendencies, or there's family systems, and there's programs that might have been outside of our awareness. So once we start healing very deeply, yes, we're healing our own experiences, but at the same time, we're breaking cycles from maybe things that have been done in a certain way for generations. And when our nature is to belong and to be part of something, we can become loyal yet to inverted or maybe not beneficial programming. A silly example is, like, if there has been lack in the family, right? And there's this belief that there's always this lack, or we're poor and it's tough to make money and the world is tough and you have to work really hard and it's very hard, then maybe if you start to prosper and become very abundant, you feel that you don't really fit in your family. And this could be very subtle, very unconscious. And then there's some sort of self-sabotage there, that whenever you're going to be successful, or differentiate yourself or achieve something, you kind of gently sabotage yourself or bring yourself down so that you can still belong to the premises within the family system or the environment. This can be in a material form, or it can also be related to health, right? When there's beliefs that in the family there's a lot of unhealthiness, or everybody gets sick because of this, or everybody gets this disease, or then we begin to condition ourselves with that environment. And because there's an unconscious need for belonging, we kind of just settle for, whether, like, maybe it could be toxicity, maybe it doesn't have to be this intense, but it's like these subtle behaviors that we become loyal to in order to belong to the system. And when you begin a sacred healing, is a deeper form of self-awareness, where you start really questioning, why do you do what you do? Maybe why do you behave the way that you do? And starting to really go deeper into what the whys of your behavior, the whys of your attitudes toward life, of your perspective. And at some point, you may also come into realization that there are things that you want to do differently, that there are things that you want to try on your own, that just because we've been doing something a certain way, it doesn't mean that it needs to be continued to be done in such a way. It's okay to question systems in order to make them better, right? Like, how can we improve if we never question if what we're doing is the best, or we're just doing it because that's the way it's been done? Without extending this too much, there's just this amazing story that I feel it relates a lot. And to keep it short, there's this girl that whenever she's gonna cook sausages in the frying pan, she cuts the edges, right? And she cooks it. And then a friend asks her, like, why do you do that? And she's like, oh, I actually don't know. My mom, that's how my mom used to do it. Long story short, she goes to the mom and asks, and the mom says, I don't know, that's how your grandmother used to do it. They go to the grandmother, and the grandmother is like, I actually don't know, that's how my mom used to do it. So it's like 4 generations where they cut the sides of the sausage before they put it in the frying pan. And let's say that in this case, they go to the great-great-grandmother and they're like, hey, great-great-grandmother, why did you use to cut the sides of the sausages to put them in the frying pan? And she was like, oh, because the family frying pan was tiny, so the sausage wouldn't fit, so I would have to cut it in order for it to fit. Why? So it's just very interesting how there's this like legacy of like, oh, maybe this is how you cook the sausages, and it was really just a matter of practicality at the time. And maybe we have a bigger frying pan and we can cook differently, but we haven't never really questioned how we were taught or what we were taught. And again, I'm not saying you have to go through this thoroughly with every aspect of your life or tackle the big things, but just it's sometimes more like the little things that we find more exhausting or more challenging. So this can be at a mental, emotional, or even in the material level, right? Like certain behaviors that we have towards like abundance or prosperity or success or health. You know, there's all sorts of like underlying loyalties that sometimes precede ourselves or our life. And again, when you start to become accountable, you start like tracing back the energies, your behaviors, and your programs. And sometimes it's like an aha moment, be like, okay, wow, this is not just on me, this is like a family thing. And that's why it's been so hard to break the cycle, right? Or this is why it's been so hard to break free. So this message is for you guys. It was I was trying to keep it simple at the introduction, but the idea is to understand that if you're in this journey, I commend you. It's not for the faint of heart, and that's why I am creating these transmissions, to give you insights, to give you inspiration, to share with you that not the first nor the last to walk this path, even though your path is unique and you have your own set of instructions and programmings and experiences and lessons. We're all in this adventure of self-development, pursuing the evolution of our souls. Because there's this drive inside of us that says, what if there's a better way? Why this way? Why not? Let's go into this quest of curiosity and keep expanding our awareness and creating the life that inside we know is possible. It's much more than fear mongering. It's much more than, you know, just settling or postponing ourselves. There's this innate divine power within us, and why not tap into it? Like, we have a lifetime to explore, so let's dive into it. And here with regards to sacred healing, when you honor your capacities, you also begin to recognize those in others, and it helps you take things less personally. What do I mean by this? Sometimes in the moment of healing, there can be a stage where we get extremely sensitive, right? Because you begin to recognize what you've been through, maybe what has been done to you, but mind you, fall into the victim, into the why me, oh, this happened, it's been so tough, my life is tougher than everybody else's. And it can feel that way, and it feels the toughest because that's the life that you're experiencing yourself. Yet, mind you, not immersing yourself too much into that, because other people have other projects, other lessons, right? So just like not ruminating too much in that, and then begin to recognize your strengths and your capacities, to dimension yourself and take a stance for yourself, and recognize that your capacities look different than others. And the fact that others are doing something that's not working for you, it's okay, because not everybody comes in with the same capacities, just like animals, right? It's like the turtle looked at the dolphin being like, oh, why can't I be like that or do that, right? Like each animal has its magic, and just like each human being, each soul has its own capacities. And then once you begin to determine yours, I invite you, and it's also implicit, you begin to recognize those in others, and you begin to realize that a lot of the things that felt personal, well, might have been personal, but not really at the core. They might have been subconscious, but it may also be have to do with the capacity of another person. For example, a person that lies to themselves. First and foremost, well, a person that lies or inverts truths, first and foremost, they're lying to themselves, because they're telling themselves, oh, if I bend truths or I manipulate people, then I'll get what I want. They may so temporarily, but at some point, the cost is going to take over, right? And then for somebody to lie, they first have to lie to themselves to convince themselves that it's okay to operate that way, or you know, they have their own betrayal system going within. So when they lie to you, of course it's personal because they lied to you, but you have to understand that you were in some way secondary to the first-hand lying that they're doing to themselves. So when you understand that they lack the capacity to operate in integrity, they lack the courage to stand by the truth or to say the truth, you begin to recognize like, okay, it was personal, they lied to me, they betrayed me, but at the same time, they don't even have the capacity to say the truth. They don't have the courage. They have not worked their character. And sometimes I feel that this simulation or this gameplay, this earth plane, it's interesting because there's all these characters, but some have not taken the time to develop themselves. And there's nothing like sometimes like weirder than lack of development, lack of character development, where you see somebody stuck for years on end, operating the same way they've always have, right? It can be trippy, and I respect everybody's journey, but it throws me off. I know that for sure, because and again, not to make it personal, right? Because we begin to recognize other people's capacities, and sometimes maybe that person has zero capacity or zero willingness or eagerness to be a better version, and they just get along with lying, and that's how they operate. And that's characters that I don't play with anymore. For example, I made a cast of my own play, and I write my own script, and whenever I identify the red flags, I make sure to set boundaries and remove people that think that they can get around with inverting the lie. With this being said, the point is honoring your capacities. And at the time that you honor your capacities, you recognize those in others, and then you stop taking things so personally. You begin to recognize that they're operating based on their own programming, based on their own capacities, and then it's up to you to choose. And again, this is where sacred healing and accountability comes in. I get to choose how I engage with them. I get to choose how I dimension my boundaries and my distance with them. I get to choose how much of my personal life do I choose to share, right? You begin to become much more aware of how do you share your energy, your information, your presence. And you begin to also free yourself from this entanglements where you're just like, oh, no matter how much I grow, I keep looping into the circumstances. It's like, because sometimes that happens when we loop is because we're expecting something outside of ourselves to change. And sometimes it just requires a lot of change within so that we can begin to change the circumstances and the outcome. For this, once you begin to recognize their capacities, again, the fact that you recognize their capacities or their needs and your capacities on your needs doesn't mean that they're going to be compatible. And that's also like a tough part of the journey. First is like recognizing yourself, your capacities, your needs. Then you begin to develop that ability to do so in others and recognize others. And then the next part is like, they may not still be compatible. The fact that I recognize their capacities and my capacities doesn't mean that we're compatible, because they like to lie and invert the truths and be manipulative, and I don't. Right? So the next stage is understanding that it's not personal to a certain degree. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. And mind you that the sacred healing, again, I'm going to bring it back to healing. That doesn't mean that you don't have to regulate yourself. That doesn't mean that they didn't trespass you. That doesn't mean they didn't abuse your trust, right? So do take the time to do proper healing there and understand how it's impacting you, because it's not just like, oh, it wasn't personal, brush it off. If you're a sensitive person, if you're self-aware, it probably hurts. So you do have to do your proper healing, but along with that, the lessons of how to dimension yourself, how to create boundaries, right? And then just like that, again, the needs of others may not be compatible with yours, and then it's up to you to keep further developing in order to organize that character within your story. You know, like, remember that you're the writer, you're the architect of your life, and you get to create and to reorganize the system once you begin to understand how you play a part in your own story. So here it takes us to the part how to navigate relationships when the needs of others differ too much from yours, like from like personal values or morals, like you're trying to take a higher moral ground and they're not, right? This again can be very challenging, especially in family systems or relationship systems where we have people too close to us that operate in a very different manner. It's very important, and it's an amazing challenge, though. I'll commend you for embarking yourself in the quest, because you're gonna have to stand your ground, and not the low ground, the because I say so ground, but it's the higher moral ground. Whereas it's like, I'm gonna operate at such a high degree that they'll either slowly remove themselves from my life because they can't stand my vibration, because they can't stand my integrity, because they can't stand how frontal and clear and transparent I am, and or I keep, taking my stance, and then the consequences of the boundaries that I set are also gonna determine the quality of the relationship. It's very important, and it's not an instantaneous process. It's more of an exercise of assessing yourself and be like, how do I feel when this person treats me like this? How do I feel after I hang out with them? And it may take some time for you to process and come to realize that you don't feel that great after you're with them, or you don't feel that great when they talk to you the way they do. And it's important for you to learn how to articulate that so that you can set boundaries, because other people are not responsible for figuring you out. So in this case, when you're in sacred healing, we're mostly invited to take initiative and to take the first step and to take in action because we have a lot to win, right? And at the same time, there's a lot in stake if we just keep surrounding ourselves with people whose needs trespass ours. And this being said, again, there's where we're going beyond good or bad, because sometimes people's capacities are not good or bad, they're just very different from us or what we need. So it's just important to be very compassionate with yourself and stay very curious, in order to understand what other people's capacities and needs are, especially when, like I said, they differ from yours, right? And here the approach is to sometimes we want to reach, but sometimes we have to create, like I was saying, the higher moral ground by staying curious, by taking a step back and being like, it's not like I'm right, they're wrong, or vice versa. It's more like we have different needs. How do I take a step back and foresee or creatively try to envision a timeline where both of our needs can be met, even if that means that I have to adjust my own plans or I have to adapt my needs, not to compromise, not to give up on them, not to settle, but to be like, okay, maybe this is indicating me that the way that I wanted to go through may not be as viable as I thought because there's something on the way. It's not good or bad. It's just like their needs or their capacities are not going to enable me to go through there. So it's a challenge for us to keep reinventing ourselves and to create new ways in which we can get through or pass by, right? So we are invited to keep taking the higher moral ground. Like if I thought this was the degree that I was going to be able to cross over and there's an obstacle, or I'm meeting I'm encountering these relationships where their needs just can't, they just don't have the capacity to meet me there, I'm gonna have to keep raising the bar, raising my game, so that again I can create the higher moral ground for myself first and foremost, right? Because I'm responsible of how I want to develop my journey and evolve my soul. So here, the few insights to kind of wrap up ideas is the first reminder is perseverance. Perseverance, because the journey can get lonely and can get exhausting, and it can be like, oh, why is it always on me? And this is so much responsibility, blah, blah, blah. The victim can kick in, and that can be challenging. Yet, I'm here to tell you, like any other good coach would say, and how I've been reminded in my own journey, perseverance. We're here for a reason, and we have this strong drive, and we have this, is like this innate energy that even if we try to put it aside, we just know, we just feel, it just kind of, again, it's a drive. So just persevere, take time to rest, take distance. And again, solitude is not the same as being lonely. You know, solitude is a virtue that you learn how to cultivate when you learn how to be with yourself, how to feel through your emotions, how to regulate yourself, how to enjoy your own company. And being lonely is more of a state of codependence, of like, I can't stand myself and I can't be alone. So mind you, feeling lonely versus cultivating solitude, which is like, again, a higher ground where that is sometimes necessary for when we are reassessing relationships, because it's important, like I said, to stand your ground and at the same time respect that other people's ground may not meet with yours. Remember, and all of this, the perseverance, you're made up of strength. Like you have this. I'm just here to activate it, to remind you, to trigger it, but it's within you. And remember your North Star, because standing your ground within, you know, your needs and your capacities is the path to prosperity and authenticity. And authenticity is a currency that we're working for, right? Because the more authentic you can be, the more you can evolve your soul, the more you can take off what's not yours, let go of baggage, of that luggage, of those wounds. And it's time to invest in yourself, to put yourself, to understand that once, if you do it from a place of integrity, when you work on yourself, you'll benefit the system. You'll benefit, even if in the short term, it's very painful, in the long term, it will pay off. And it's authenticity without postponing yourself anymore. So the sacred healing journey is not for everybody. It has its challenges, yet if you're here, I commend you. Thank you so much for your presence and your awareness. Perseverance is the key. Remember your North Star, and assessing yourself will give you the opportunity to understand that others are doing whatever they're programmed or whatever they're capable of, outside of it all being personal. And if it feels very personal, it's up to you to take distance, to assess yourself, and reinvent yourself. Sometimes it's just a matter of like, you know what, this system is dysfunctional. I need to tap out, see the role that I'm playing in so that I can reinvent myself and come back stronger and come back and organize myself accordingly. If this resonates, please feel free to let me know or start a conversation, or if there's anything that relates or any advice or insights that you want to share with the crew, feel free to start a conversation. Thank you so much for your presence, and I will see you in another moment of the now.